go live on Facebook and we'll be ready to roll. All right, here we go. And welcome to episode number 120 of the Showrunner. I am Jared Morris, serial podcast host, an eternal believer in the power of balancing pride and humility. And here with me, as always, is my co-host, Johnny Naster, serial t-shirt wearer, sandwich sommelier, and the host of the world-renowned and best-selling Hack the Entrepreneur. We are your podcasting mentors, excited to be with you for another week of talking about not just how to podcast, but more specifically, how to drive meaningful results from a podcast-centered marketing strategy. And this week, we are revisiting a topic that we first addressed several years back in an episode titled Podcasting Lessons from a Psychotherapist. That was episode 88. And included in that conversation was a discussion about why it's essential that you view your words and actions behind the microphone as a performance, plus a 3-step process for how to create your inner podcasting character. And a lot has happened since we released that episode, and that is why we want to revisit the topic now with the additional insight that we have gained from the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of episodes that we've hosted since then. But before we get to all of that, it is time to welcome in my co-host, Johnny Naster, and we will do so this week in a little bit of a different way by hitting up the random question generator so that we can learn a little bit more about Mr. Naster. So here we go. All right, Johnny, here is this week's question. That sound effect is great.
You haven't even explained what this is.
No, I haven't. What is one thing that you would like to become better at?
One thing I would like to become better at is I'm going to say
Answering questions.
I'm looking for something profound, but it doesn't need to be profound. I want to become a better podcaster, but that one seems obvious. So let's just keep it easy. I want to become a better cook, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've got like some apps that give me like recipes and stuff, and I've enjoyed like getting the food and putting some of it together. And there's a lot to learn, but I really enjoy eating good food, so that's what I want to get better at.
Wow. Do you do most of the cooking in your house?
No.
Your wife does a lot of it now?
Yeah. I try and do it maybe once a week, like a full, and then it seems like on the weekends we eat out a lot, because we live in a city full of amazing restaurants. But no, she does most of it. But I mean, she's really good at it, and so I can learn a lot. So I usually hover.
Yeah. Very nice. That's cool. I agree with that one. I do a lot of cooking in my house, but I constantly want to get better, trying out new recipes. I want to get just better instincts. Like, the people who just have good cooking instincts and they know how to season things. They know what goes well together. I don't really know that. So I kind of want to add that to my cooking repertoire and get a little bit better than just being able to follow recipes.
Yeah. I think that's good.
I like that.
More is usually the answer I've found for spices and things.
More spices?
Yeah, well, like with the advice, if it says like put this much garlic or this much something, just put more of it. Is the advice I've learned on Reddit.
We'll you'll never go wrong listening to advice on Reddit. Never go wrong. Okay, so let's keep going here. If this is your first time listening to the Showrunner, we'd like to welcome you. We are glad that you're here. You may find that this is not your typical podcast about podcasting, and that is exactly the way that we want it. If you have been with us before, welcome back. We appreciate you being with us again, and we hope to be better today than we were the last time that you were with us. And whether you're a newbie or a grizzled Showrunner veteran, if at any point during your journey with us, you decide that you want more, that you want to get more serious and take the next step as not just a podcaster, but as a showrunner, we are ready for you. Visit our homepage, showrunner.fm, and drop your email address into the field that you'll see right there at the top of the page. That's the best way to stay connected with us and with the show. And if you ever want to contact us directly, you can just hit reply on one of our emails, ask us a question, and we will be happy to answer you. Now, Johnny, I want to do something else a little bit different here to start off this week's episode. And I want to do a bit of a spotlight. And I want to talk about someone who has made the leap from podcaster to showrunner. And so I want to briefly shine the showrunner spotlight on a longtime listener of ours and a member of our course named Mac Pritchard.
Hi, this is Mac of Mac's List.
That is Mac from his podcast, from the very beginning of his podcast. And if you have checked out the sales page for our new podcast positioning course, which, by the way, is still on sale at the 31% discount until midnight tonight, that's Wednesday, June 20th, 2018. If you've checked out the sales page, you might have seen the testimonial from Mac in which he says that he recommends Showrunner courses to other podcasters because of, quote, the practical content and focus on strategic questions. Our positioning strategy is working. Yes. Well, earlier today, I got an email from Mac in which he requested that I include his podcast name, Find Your Dream Job, in his testimonial. And my response was, absolutely. This is a perfectly reasonable request. And I think it's a smart one by Mac because he knows that the people interested in the Showrunner are most likely podcast listeners. So why not give his show one more opportunity for exposure? So I did it immediately. But here was the best part about Mac's email. He went on to say, speaking of my podcast, we're starting our 4th year of production in August. We continue to publish every Wednesday, now get 22,000 downloads a month, and regularly rank in the top 40 on the iTunes career podcasting chart. Let's pause for a quick moment of applause for those awesome statistics. And Mac went on to say, your Showrunner course and your own podcast helped me turn my idea into a real program. So thank you. And to that, I say, no, Mac, thank you for all of your support for the Showrunner, for being such a great member of the community, and for being such a great example with your own show. Johnny, I think you will agree with me that we wish Mac continued success in the future. And if you listening to this are a professional focused on finding work that matters, you should definitely consider checking out Mac's show. It's called Find Your Dream Job, and you can learn more at maxlist.org/podcast. So, Johnny, kudos to Mac for being an awesome showrunner.
Yeah, totally. And I love the outreach for the testimonial. And this is a great, I don't want to get sidelined, but this is a great sort of lesson, and things that we should all be doing is we all use software, we all use products, we all take courses, we all learn from people or use things that make our shows, our lives better. And most of those companies and people behind those are looking for testimonials. And we're going to get into that today, but do the outreach. And this is something I've actually started doing, actually just like emailing people testimonials and being, this is what has happened with me. And it's amazing because one thing, I mean, you can get mentioned on shows like this. People can mention you in any other way, writing or whatever it happens to be that they do on their site. And also you can get your name and face there and possibly a backlink to your site, which helps in so many other ways. Those testimonials you see everywhere, like those aren't typically people going out and looking for them. It's people bringing them to you and just telling you. And it's just nice to like actually reach out to a company or somebody you've dealt with, not because you have a problem. You know what I mean? Like not just support, I have this problem. Like, how about, man, it's just awesome what you created. Thank you. And that's it. Just something on the side there. I like the appreciation aspect of it. So I really appreciate that, Mac.
Yeah, I love it. Excellent point. All righty. So let's move on to this week's main topic. So we talk a lot about the idea of authenticity here on the Showrunner. In fact, it is the first of our 4 pillars for a remarkable show: authenticity, usefulness, sustainability, and monetization. And it's not first by accident. If you are not authentic as a showrunner in the enthusiasm and engagement with which you approach your topic and in how you approach your audience as well, then you have very little chance at being useful, and you certainly won't be sustainable. And you will have little to no shot at actually building the kind of loyal audience you need to drive meaningful results from your podcast. But we've also talked before about how you have to approach what you're doing behind the microphone as a performance, because it is a performance, whether it's live or pre-recorded, whether it's with co-hosts or by yourself, whether you're the interviewer shining the spotlight on an interviewee, or you're doing a monologue show so the spotlight is always on you. When that green or red light is on and words are being recorded, you are performing for your audience. And that can be tricky. You know, when we use a word like performing, it can suggest that we are putting on a front or that we are somehow being fake. But that isn't the case. At least it's not the case if the foundation of your show is that authentic connection with your topic and your audience that we just talked about. The performance is about channeling all of your energy and attention into delivering useful content to your audience. For those 5 or 15 or 50 minutes that you're recording, it's about stripping everything else away and being 100% focused and consumed with being present for your audience, just like an actor does in front of a camera, just like a musician does on stage. So yes, you can be authentic and still be delivering a performance for your audience. In fact, delivering a focused performance is the only way to truly be authentic for your audience. And thinking about show running as a performance can have another benefit as well. If we have a character who we become for each show that we host, a character based on an authentic part of ourselves, and a character nonetheless, this can also help us bring the kind of consistent focus and energy that we need to sustain our ability to provide consistent usefulness over time. Which brings us to this week's topic, making sure you proofread the very end of your script before you get to the final paragraph so that it doesn't trip you up, which it just did for me right there. But no, it brings us to this week's topic, which is how do you create your showrunner character, Johnny? And as I mentioned in the intro, this is something that we've covered before in the past. And recently, you've brought it up a couple of times on recent episodes and just in chats that we've had about how the timing is right to kind of revisit it. So, let's use that, talking about the authenticity of a performance as a jumping off point, and let's get into how you create your inner show running character.
Excellent. Yeah. And I love the introduction to it. And I have mentioned it because it's been really beneficial to me. And then in turn, it's been really beneficial to my audience. So I will admit that I guess selfishly in that way, I did do it for myself as the host. It was something I needed to do to, I think, be able to create more content that connected better. I felt like I was just following one track, and I was. And so when I went through the process of understanding this, this helped me so that you can kind of find different tracks when you need to and still make that authentic connection. So it is about you in a way, but it's also makes you better at connecting with your audience and giving that connection. So the ways that we found creating your inner character are broken into 3 components, which we'll go over all of them, but it's elements, identity, and then storylines. So it's not just about like picking a name and going with that or anything. It is, there it is, elements, identity, and storylines. So let's just get started with elements. Within elements, we see it as having 3 different ones. So the elements are backstory, character flaws, and polarity. So it starts with backstory. Think of this as the person that you can, or the character that you can use in all your different episodes. And we'll get to different ways you can do that. But think about the fact that you need a backstory because just every effective character has one. Like, you can't just come in and just from scratch, just position or try and position yourself as an expert or as any of the other characters that we're going to discuss if you don't have a backstory to go with it. There's also a twist to this, why this is really helpful, I think, for a lot of showrunners starting out or wanting to start out. I think a lot of people, and I struggled with this a bit, but again, I found a way around it. Sometimes we want to become that expert or that showrunner, but we aren't confident in our expertise yet, or our knowledge, or our experience. And that can be part of your backstory if it needs to be, because as you'll see when we get into identity, there are identities you can take without having that expertise, and you can then gain that backstory from that.
So is my backstory just kind of like my bio? Like for me, like my backstory as the host of the showrunner is the experience that I have as a podcast host?
100%.
Okay.
100%. And you had that backstory. I had that backstory when we started the showrunner because you had podcasts. I had podcasts that were successful, so we had that backstory. What I'm saying is you could actually start a podcast about podcasting without that success backstory. You'll see within identities how you can do that, which then to me enables you, no matter if you feel confident in your backstory or not, to still be able to do it. But it does have to have sort of that backstory. You have to be honest in the fact that don't make up one if you don't have it, but you can be honest with this is it and this is how you gain it. I've gained a lot of my expertise in entrepreneurship in the fact that I've interviewed almost 500 people. That creates a great backstory now going forward, but it started differently, if that makes sense.
So, and would it also be relevant here to make a distinction that we've often made, which is the distinction between authenticity and transparency? Because authenticity is about bringing to your audience the parts of yourself, of your experience, your wisdom, your background, these parts of your backstory that are going to be relevant to them in helping you help them make the transformation that they want to make. But there may, and so like for me, right, like being an Indiana basketball fan wouldn't be part of my backstory as a showrunner, except for the fact that I host a show about it where I've gotten a lot of experience about it. So I can talk about it and mention it because there is a part of that that's relevant to the audience. But if I had never started a show, like there would be no reason for me to bring that topic in here. That would be transparency without really delivering any type of authentic connection. Is that important in the backstory? Is that you somewhat kind of craft the parts of it that are relevant to your audience and that those are the parts of your backstory that you're bringing in? Or is that not important?
Right. Of course. Everything ties back to your audience. And it's like I want to fully explain that to you, but in identity, it's going to make more sense. I don't want to jump ahead.
Jared, calm down. Stop.
Then we're into that. So let's move on. So that's backstory. You have to have that effective character backstory as one of your elements. Then you need character flaws, right? So for anyone or any story to be believable and honest, you have to expose some character flaws, which again gets into this transparency and authenticity. I say some character flaws because obviously you don't want to. There's a line that you used before, and I think it came from Brian Clark, which was that difference between, I think, authenticity and transparency. There's a fine line that you can cross that you don't want to always cross. I mean, people don't need to hear all of your character flaws, but some of them help. This original episode was done around lessons from my psychotherapist, which, I mean, I wouldn't consider that necessarily a character flaw, but it is sort of an honesty to it that brought it there. And then this lesson sort of got buried in there. So that's why we're bringing it back to you.
Your psychotherapist probably knows things about you that the showrunner audience doesn't know and that they probably don't need to know.
Exactly. There you go. But don't try and hide them all. Actually, if you don't think you can find some, find some. Like with effort, try and find some because it adds authenticity and obviously honesty to this whole thing. And then the last element that you're going to look for, which Jared covers really well in the positioning course, actually, is polarity or polarizing of your audience or potential audience. Meaning to, as much as you want to attract an audience, you also want to repel people who aren't in your audience. So it's better for people to love or hate you than it is for them to just kind of be like, meh, I'll take them or leave them. So it's when you find this story, when you find these elements, this identity, and these storylines as we get through it, you can find it and then you can almost like elevate it within yourself to really polarize your audience for or against you. And don't think of it as just like, well, I want everybody to be my audience, because we know that that's not true. But you think of really famous sort of pop stars or people, it's like people love them and people hate them. And they're uber famous because they've done that. The people who you just kind of forget about are the ones that we just kind of forget about. So one of your main elements of your characters is going to be this polarizing effect that you're going to have on people that come in, listen to you, and are just like, nope, or yes, she's who I want to stick around and keep listening to.
But this also goes back to authenticity. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that you want to create polarity, kind of conjure it up. Like your polarity should be based on values that you genuinely hold, line in the sand moments where you can pick a side and your audience can pick a side with you, but not necessarily things that you manufacture or that you make up or hot takes that you're doing just to, cause a stir in this episode. That might work for like a day, but you will eventually lose the trust of your audience. And now you're not really writing an authentic backstory.
Right. That's like looking for like a reaction or something. I'm talking about literally building, like having ways of bringing your information, your knowledge, your education, your entertainment to your audience. And when you go through this process and find out who it is you want, like who that's going to be, that authentic self, I often find that, especially when we're starting, we want to water down our character, who we are. And our character is, it's not manufactured. It's who I am. I have a certain character about me, right? The fact that I listen to punk rock and I eat sandwiches and those aren't manufactured. But some people would say, it's like, well, don't talk about punk rock because most people aren't into it, or don't, you know what I mean? Or as the showrunner, maybe you guys should like really go to some classes and learn the technical aspect of being showrunners. And it's like, well, we kind of do, but that's kind of not us. So let's just actually, this is our line in the sand and this is the way we went. People who are really into that, like Toby, who's been on the show recently, he probably doesn't want to listen to us for technical lessons. Fair enough, right?
I know, but the thought of Toby listening to us for audio advice is really amusing.
It is, I know. So anyways, that's what I'm saying. This whole thing, we have to understand it and take it as based on authenticity, who you really are, and then putting that into a way that is most like, I guess, authentic and effective for your audience and that connection between them. None of this, and I don't want to have to keep repeating this, so I want to sort of set that precedent across this whole lesson that this is not about creating a persona that's completely fake and manufactured. This is about finding it within yourself and then finding ways that you can use it to make that connection.
Yeah. All right, Johnny, let's talk about Hover because they are our new sponsor here on the Showrunner, and we are really excited to be working with them, as we mentioned a couple weeks back when we introduced them. And one of the reasons why we are excited to work with them, in addition to obviously appreciating their support for our show, is that we use Hover ourselves and actually believe in their product. And so this is why we're happy to recommend Hover as a place where podcasters should get the domain names that turn them into showrunners. And Johnny, you and I both appreciate the fact that Hover doesn't include annoying upsells in its checkout process, which I hate about places where you buy domains, that has a clean user interface, and that they pride themselves on best-in-class customer support. Plus, there are 400 plus domain name extensions available, so you can choose from the classics as well as the fun niche extensions. You've used Hover a little bit more than I have to this point. What have been your favorite parts of the Hover domain experience for you?
I have to go with their, as they call it, best-in-class customer support, because lots of people say that. And so actually when I had heard that the first time, I kind of just, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, of course, none of us say we have terrible support. That's what we have. Yeah. But their support was, it was unlike anything I've ever dealt with. I brought over, I think it was 13 domains to them a while back from like all different places that I had them. And they actually did this concierge service for me. And it was amazing. Super helpful, super nice, super effective, and gave me clarity where I needed it. And then other parts, they said, you don't even need to know how this works. We'll just get it done for you. So absolutely, it's their support. Beyond that, it's obviously not having to deal with the annoying stuff that lots of other places make you deal with. But.
Yeah. Very nice. And you listening, if you take action on this now, we have worked out a deal. So go to hover.com/showrunner and get started today with 10% off of your first purchase. Remember, no upsells, a clean and easy user interface, and a best-in-class customer support team. And, of course, you help out the Showrunner too. Get 10% off your first purchase today at hover.com/showrunner. All right, so let's continue on, Johnny, talking about how you create your inner showrunning character. And you mentioned in the beginning that there are three components: elements, identity, and storylines. We talked about elements in the first part, and I think we really set the stage and hopefully hammered home the idea that when we're talking about performance or we're talking about character, you have to keep authenticity in mind. This is not about creating something fake for your audience. This is about actually, pulling out the most authentic parts of you that you are going to present to your audience, and kind of going through this process will help you do that. So let's go on now to the second step in creating your inner character, and let's talk about identity.
Yeah, this is the part where it is this is the part of the front-facing thing. And to me, this is actually where it's really beneficial for you, the showrunner, and it was for me, because it really freed me up and I guess gave me more inspiration for content creation and being able to direct where I wanted next episodes to go. So identity, I have it as 4 different identities that you can take, which is the leader, the adventurer, the reporter, and the reluctant hero. So we start as the leader. So the leader is to me what I had always thought of as that's just the way you need to create it, right? You're the expert. You're the person at the mic. You're the person behind the video. You're the expert who knows all and is there teaching the people that want to learn this, right? I know how to do this. let me teach you how to do this too. Yes, that works really well sometimes. I mean, we're, I guess, kind of taking that approach with this lesson in a way, but you'll see there's also elements of the other ones. And so this one, to me, this is why it got so hard. Because sometimes I just would feel, I mean, after creating so many lessons, so many episodes of things, so many videos, sometimes I would just feel like it was like my well had run dry. Like, I don't have something right now that I feel confident to just teach as the leader in front of the classroom. And so you need to know that this isn't the only one, but this is the one, correct me if I'm wrong, Jared, but this was the one that I only ever thought of as a creator, as a showrunner.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's the easiest one to identify. It's definitely easy to fall into that trap, like you said, that you have to be this. Like who would be some examples of people who are showrunners that are leaders? Like, you think of someone like Dave Ramsey, right? He approaches his show from, I would think, a leader. You know, he's a thought leader. He's kind of leading the conversation. He's giving advice. He's teaching. And again, you know, there are shades of gray here, and some will, you know, kind of morph into others. But that would be an example of that. And I think if you have, you know, 20, 30, 40 years of experience, and you've probably done a lot of teaching, and you've written 20 books, and you can just, you know, you have that well that may never run dry of things to teach, you can probably do this and feel real comfortable with it. But I think what's great about these other identities that we're about to talk about is they show you some alternate paths that still work and help reduce a little bit of that pressure to always feel like you have to have the most profound thing ever on your topic to say to be worthy of putting a show out there, because that is absolutely not true at all. So, and
Right.
so let's go into some of these other ones, because I think there is a time when you need to be a leader. And there are certainly shows that do that very well. And so I think you do want to identify when those times are, but you don't need to shrink away from the microphone in those moments where you're not being the leader, because there are other ways to serve your audience really well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're going to also see, and I'm going to encourage you to use different identities at different times. Identities of yourself, but these identities as we're identifying them here and discussing them. So the next identity is the adventurer. This is one we've talked about a lot on the Showrunner, because it's one that we've really adopted. And we had this one a bit, but I was thinking of it in the leadership sort of sense. And so it was almost watering it down too much. But the adventurer is, we call ourselves podcast adventurers, Jared and I, mostly me, because I really like it. But I don't have to be an absolute expert at all times. I can just be one step or two steps ahead of you, trying things on my shows, figuring out what works and what doesn't, and bringing it back to you. Like, think of the adventurer. You have your community in the middle of the jungle, and the adventurer goes out and finds things and brings back things that work, things that don't, finds tools, all those kinds of things. And so you don't have to be just the person up on the hill speaking down to everybody. It's like, I just found out this cool thing and it will help you. Or else, I tried this. Maybe you're thinking of it, maybe you're not, but it absolutely just tanked. So here's my advice as the adventurer: you should not try that.
We're literally doing it right now, broadcasting our recordings live, you know, trying to bring music in live to the recordings. We're doing that right now. And
right.
And I love taking on that role.
Right. And so rather than us saying, okay, well, we got to go to another show, do it like 50 times live, figure out what works and what doesn't, put together a whole big production around it as a leader, and then bring it to you and serve it to you. It's like we're bringing it to you live and just coming back and telling you what works and what doesn't. So the adventurer, if you are like me, this will be the one that really inspires you, really motivates you, and really gives you the confidence that you only have to be 1, 2, or 3 steps ahead of your audience, and just doing the things and bringing it back and bringing in lessons. Obviously, entertainment, education, all those things still need to come into it. But think of it as that adventurer, not as the person who knows every single thing about your topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a concept of showing your work that I think kind of fits here. I know that's something that Austin Kleon, talks about a lot, that, as you're building an audience, as you're creating content, show people the work that goes into it. Show them the behind the scenes, show them some of the slip ups, show them some of the decision making. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why this show connected when we first started it, when we were both, kind of younger in our podcasting days, was showing people the work. And again, we're trying to continue doing that. Like, that's something that we value doing. So I think there are times, again, to show you the distinction, I think there are times when you want to be the leader. And I think putting together the podcast positioning course is an example of us taking a leadership role on a conversation that we've got a lot of experience in, that we feel like we have something very cohesive to share. That is more the leadership role. And doing this right now on this episode, which we're streaming live on Facebook and Periscope and YouTube, and pulling in, live music and doing some of that stuff, scripting some of these new sections to see how it works. This is being more of an adventurer and also showing a little bit of the work along the way. So you can bounce back and forth and take on different roles at different times with your audience. And thinking about it in this way can really open up different ways that you can kind of reveal yourself to your audience and show yourself and build a more well-rounded, nuanced connection with your audience. And again, it all comes back to authenticity. It all comes back to connection, and having more of these ways that you can connect with the audience is going to help you in the long run.
Absolutely. And so the third identity you can take on, and this one ties back to backstory in the first element. To me, this is the one where you have a drive, you have a desire to become a voice, an expert, a person positioned as an authority within your marketplace, but you haven't started and you don't have that backstory to back it up. So as we said, as Jared really, really clarified at the beginning, you don't make up that backstory. You don't completely fabricate, or you don't fabricate any of this actually, but you can take on the identity of the reporter. The reporter is literally that. Like, think of an interviewer. As I said, interviewing 500 entrepreneurs over the last 3 years puts me in kind of an expertise state because I've had those conversations. So interviewer, writer, or even an aggregator, like putting together newsletters and just bringing in other people's information. Some people do this with social media, where they just start aggregating all the great bits of a marketplace, and you become the person, the go-to for that information. You didn't create it. You just curated it together for people. That can create your identity, and that will create an amazing backstory. It's like, wow, she's the one who created that newsletter that now has 10,000 subscribers about this topic. You now have a backstory, and now all of a sudden you become a leader in that sense. So this one's really powerful if you feel like you don't have that backstory, yet you still have the desire to become the showrunner that you want to be, is to start as a reporter.
You also bring up an interesting point, because you just mentioned creating a newsletter, which has nothing to do with recording an episode of your podcast, right? But what you're suggesting is that even things that you do outside of your podcast, outside of actually hosting a show, can be creating your character, kind of more fully coloring in the lines of who you are, giving your audience something else. And this is why we shifted, our focus on the Showrunner to not just about podcasting, but a podcast-centered marketing strategy, because, what you do with a newsletter can complement what you're doing on your show. And that can be a little bit of a different character that you step into to bring your audience something different. So I'm glad that you kind of went with that and seamlessly just talked about it in the midst of talking about podcasting, because there's no real reason to think of there being like bright lines between those things. These things go back and forth, and they all kind of play off of each other. So I'm glad that you went there. I just wanted to point it out.
And speaking of going there and not going there, I said there was 4 identities. There's a fourth one. I'm not even going to mention it because actually, now that since doing this and putting this together a year and a bit ago and working through it and using these identities, I've never actually used this one. And so that one is the reluctant hero, but I really don't know. It's sort of that humble hero who doesn't want the spotlight. And I don't know if that actually plays super well into a showrunner myself, like, because it can be part adventurer. It can not so much leader, because typically you're just a leader and you're confident in that way, not reluctant about it. So that one's there, but I don't see that actually now. I've never used it within myself.
All right, let me give you an example then, because I think I do know someone who fits the humble hero, and it's my co-host on Podcast on the Brink, Alex Bozich, who launched the site Inside the Hall that hosts this podcast. And he's the one who has a lot of the expertise, does a lot of the first person reporting. He asked me to host the show because, kind of being that point man behind the microphone is not necessarily something that he wanted. But I, eventually convinced him to be comfortable enough to come on, help me with interviews, do all of that, because people really respect what he has to say. So, and obviously he manages the podcast on the back end for his own show, building the audience for it, all of those things. I think he, in a sense, at least in how he is presented on the show itself, is the humble hero, because he doesn't want that spotlight and all to himself. He brought on someone else to co-host the show for him and do some of those things. So I think he fits that role. But I do think you're right. Of these four, that is probably the one that is going to be the most limited in scope. And that for people who are really looking to become showrunners in the way that we talk about it, probably would be the one that they would kind of inhabit the least amount, I would say. But kudos to Alex, because I think he fills that role and fills it really well in a way that really works well for his show and his audience.
So creating your inner character, there's three components, right? Elements, identity, and now storylines. So you have the backstory, the character flaws, polarity. You're deciding which identity to take on to create this one specific piece of content you want. Now let's look at the storylines that you can use to create that content. And when I say specific, I mean an episode or a blog post or an ebook, whatever it happens to be. Again, these are fluid, and you should be pulling from each of them that identify with you so that you can continue to create a lot of content. So let's say the first one is loss and redemption, right? So everything was awesome, then blank happened. I had to figure out how to blank, and then I unlocked blank. Now I blank everything, and it's awesome again, right? So everything was awesome, right?
You don't blank everything. You blank and everything's awesome.
Oh, you blank and everything, right? So
you're not blanking everything.
it doesn't. The blank doesn't work as well when I just read it out like that. But so say everything was awesome, right? Everything was awesome with my podcast. It was just kicking butt, and then all of my listeners disappeared overnight. I had to figure out how to get my listeners back using social media traffic, say. So I unlocked it. I unlocked how to do it with social media. Now I have all of my listeners and 50% more, and everything is awesome again.
If anybody has been paying attention to what happened with Jordan Harbinger at The Art of Charm, and then the new show that he started, the Jordan Harbinger Show, he kind of did a tour of all the old podcasts explaining this exact thing. I mean, almost to a T. So that would be an example of this in real life that a lot of people are probably familiar with.
Yeah, very well said. The loss and redemption. So there it is. The next one is us versus them, right? There's a lot of podcasts out there about the technical aspect of it. And then there's us. There's them.
We just pray we have our microphones plugged in.
Exactly. Because we've run into the situation where we haven't. So us versus them fits well with obviously that whole polarizing of your audience, because this really ties into it. With us versus them, some people will be introduced to you. They'll feel that sort of polarity, and they'll be like, actually, I belong over there with them. Perfect. The ones who are here with us are your people, are our people. That's how it works, right? So us versus them can really work. And again, us versus them is only one aspect of the character traits of us as showrunners. We don't make everything us versus them and everything we talk about at all. But in that one aspect of it, that technical aspect in setting us there, it's that. But then we can also be adventurers and leaders in other aspects. And we don't think that everything is an us versus them. This is one storyline that we've used within ourselves, within our characters, and within our branding. And that's it. And some people identify to that, some people don't. Perfect. And then they might identify to other ones or not. So that's us versus them.
And finding opportunities to do that, authentic opportunities to do that, is absolutely essential for your positioning and for carving out your unique niche. This is really less of a suggestion and more of something that you really need to find opportunities to do where it fits, where it's genuine. But this can have a huge impact on your positioning.
Right. Third storyline you can use and you should use is before and after. We know the pictures. We've seen the before and after pictures all the time. You see this on TV commercials. But this one is another one that we used effectively, I would say, on the Showrunner, which was, I know my story was that I had a software business and I just wasn't known, but I wanted to get out there more into the public, and I wanted to have these conversations. So I started a podcast. I marketed it right, I branded it right, I positioned it right, and I pushed it right, and it worked. And so now I'm here. So there was the before show running, there's the after show running. If you were the kind of person that is looking for the result of the after show running, this is a great storyline to follow, and somebody who can either lead you there or be the adventurer taking you there. I can't tell who froze up. One of us froze up.
Okay.
Oh,
Did it just totally freeze up on you?
completely, 100%.
Yeah, it did on me too. All right, I think we're still live in
It
places.
says we are.
I think we're still live. Okay. Well,
Okay.
let's roll with it.
But because I was talking to you, then I was like left it for you to talk, and you didn't say anything. You just sat there in one position. It's zooming in on your face right now, but that's okay.
I was trying
So that was the before and after. So we have Lost Redemption, Us versus Them, the before and after. Now there's one also that can be just like the Amazing Discovery, which would tie in really well to the adventurer again. Like, whoa, I just found this out about running a show or about finding a new audience. And now I'm bringing it back to you to show you. Can very clearly, obviously, tie into that adventurer role with that Amazing Discovery. And again, this would only be sort of part of your storyline, but this is a storyline you can use for, I guess, for different aspects. Maybe not so much for content. I guess the content could work around it too, but definitely for trainings or teachings, you can learn that discovery and bring it back and position it to, I guess, be sold to your audience as well.
Yeah, this is something that I really want to do. Actually, with what we found out about streaming live on on Periscope, Facebook, and YouTube simultaneously, because I've been wanting to do that for 2 years, and it took me a long time to figure out. It's pretty easy to do if you just want to stream yourself live on those, but to actually stream discussions like what we do on the Assembly Call and what you and I do here, and to do it in kind of a simple way that I could manage everything from one place was really difficult to figure out. So like as soon, I think I probably slacked you like 5 times that week. I was so excited when I actually figured it out.
Yeah.
And so I've got like in my head this whole like 5,000 word blog post, like, tutorial ready to show people how to do it. Of course, talking about it here on this episode when Zoom crashed on us in the middle.
I was just going to say the one time you start talking about this Amazing Discovery.
That's right, though. Look,
but
now we're back. So now I've actually been through a situation where it crashed in the middle and opened right back up, and here we are. So that's good to know, because when I do this for the Assembly Call, that show is actually broadcast live on the radio. So I kind of needed to see what's going to happen if something crashes. So I'm kind of glad that we saw what happened here. And it didn't turn out to be too bad. But that would be an example of Amazing Discovery. And, this is where, you think back to the characters, right? When you're an adventurer and you have an Amazing Discovery, like those are two great pairings together. When you can have that, you've got this Amazing Discovery. Now you take on the adventurer role, you're showing this to your audience. So these things really work well together.
Yeah, exactly. Reluctant hero, leader, all those ones can fit in. And then the final one ties back into the intro, which was Mac's show and him with a testimonial. So a testimonial is a storyline that you can and should use, right? Sharing other people's successes with what you have brought to them, whether that's what you wrote, an interview you did, or the information that you've put together for them in a curation sense, or the adventurer or the leader. You will make other people and see other people's successes with your trainings, your teachings, and your sharings. You need to then take those and share them with your audience, because it's something that our audiences can relate to really well, because usually it has an outcome that the audience also wants. And I think you can feel a lot closer to that person, especially if you're taking on sort of a leadership role or something. There might be a bit more of a distance between your audience and then you at the leader front. So this allows you to sort of merge the gap with testimonials in the middle of it. So again, you can reach out and give testimonials to people, help them with their storylines. And you can also seek them out from your audience, or at least when they do come in, like it came in to us today, really sort of run with it and turn that into an effective storyline for your audience.
Yes. All right. So to review real quick, this kind of 3-step process that we just outlined for creating your inner character that will really help you sustain this authentic performance for your audience that allows you to be useful for your audience over time. The first step is the elements, or kind of the first part of creating your show running character is the elements. We talked about the backstory, the character flaws, and the polarity that you want to create. So you got to understand those elements. The second part then is the different identities that you can slip into and out of and back into again: the leader, the adventurer, the reporter, and then the storylines that Johnny explained to you: loss and redemption, us versus them, before and after, amazing discovery, and testimonials. When you put these together, they will really help you every time that you get behind the microphone to deliver the best part of yourself to your audience. And ultimately, that's the goal. That's what we're trying to do every single time that we step in front of our audience. It's not to be perfect. It's not to never slip up, when we make a little mistake verbally, that kind of thing. Like, I mean, just look at this episode. I screwed up, reading my script earlier. We had the thing crash. Like, that kind of stuff is going to happen. And it's okay, as long as what you're delivering to your audience in terms of the you that you're bringing and the content that you're bringing, if it's truly authentic, if it's truly useful, that's the stuff that really matters. And, thinking of yourself slipping into a character and providing a performance that delivers that best part of you is a great way to ignore the stuff that doesn't matter and stay laser focused on the stuff that does. And when you do that, and when you do it over time, that's how you create an authentic connection with an audience that can really last, that can then really help you drive meaningful results from it, whatever those meaningful results might be to you. Any final thoughts, Johnny, before we wrap up?
No, this has been good. I think we should close this out
before it
tell
crashes
them that
again.
one important thing and go back to adventuring.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So thank you, everybody, for joining us for another week of talking about how to drive meaningful results from a podcast-centered marketing strategy. If you want more from us, if you want to join one of our courses, if you want to view our show archive, if you want to get on our email list, we are ready for you. Just visit showrunner.fm. That's showrunner.fm, and you will find what you are looking for. We will be back with another brand new episode next week. And actually, Johnny, this is a good moment to stop here and let people know we just published an episode on Tuesday. That was episode 119. This is episode 120. We are publishing it today. So people are going to get episodes back to back from us. And then henceforth, we're going to publish our episodes on Wednesday, because we figured there isn't really much of a point if we're going to record live on Wednesday to hold it for a week. Now that we're doing it live, it made sense before when we were recording privately, but now that we're doing it live and it's already out there, let's just put it out right away as a podcast. It makes sense because, podcast listeners are watching it live. And it also makes sense because as I was kind of putting the scripts together and planning out the episode, it was really weird, trying to think about, okay, we're going to say this live because we're producing it on this day, but the actual podcast episode isn't going live till next week. That is a headache that no one needs. So we're just going to start putting the episodes out right afterwards. So Wednesday, henceforth, is when new Showrunner podcast episodes will hit your podcasting apps. And we hope that you will be with us for as many of those episodes as possible, whether you want to check us out live or listen on the podcast. So until then, until we're back again next Wednesday, be authentic, be useful, and keep showing up. We will talk to you soon.
Take care.
All right. And since we are still live here, I think we kind of want to make it part of our live process if we have some time at the end to take a question or two. So if anybody's here, I don't know if anybody is still listening live, if they stuck it out through Zoom crashing on us. If you are, shoot us a question. I'm going to open up Facebook. Do you have your Periscope open, Johnny?
No, but I can open it. Yes.
Okay. So see if we get anything there. If not, we'll pop off. But if you do have a question, let us know. So when Zoom, when it crashed, I just froze and then it just stopped and restarted again.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what happened for me too, which was actually a pretty good way for it to resolve itself. So
yeah, it worked out well.
That's good. Because I imagine that's going to be about the worst thing that would happen during a live show. So that is good. All right. So no questions. Periscope. Bob, did you really have a Zoom crash? Yes. Zoom absolutely crashed. So Johnny's in the middle of talking and it just freezes. So you froze, your hands were like up here. It was really kind of funny. I should have taken a screenshot. Your hands were like up here and then there was no audio coming in. And so whenever that happens, I don't want to say anything right away because like if it's on my end or something and I need to pop out, but it's still going fine for you, you always want to kind of try and identify what's going on. Don't just jump in and start talking right away. Give it a few seconds to resolve itself. And so after like, I don't know, probably 5 or 10 seconds, I find, I just said like, Johnny, are you there? Are you there? Because I didn't know if you could hear me. And then I was basically just going to open up Slack and try and message you. Okay, so Bob saw he saw you active the whole time. So this might have been on my end then.
Oh,
so
I just saw you freeze up.
Yeah, and I saw you freeze up, but he saw you active the whole time.
Nice.
So it might have been an issue on my end. And then I wonder if it's because I was the one, I'm the host of the webinar. Okay, so okay, you could hear Johnny or you could see Johnny and you couldn't hear him, Bob, or you could hear Johnny too. Could you hear him also? So, but I'm glad that it just like reopened right up with everybody there. That was really helpful.
Yeah, it just continued on. It shut down for like a split second. That was it.
Yeah, so maybe there was just a little glitch in my connection or something.
So also as a side thing,
okay, so they could hear you the whole time. So it was just me. It's nothing on my end.
As a side thing, it was we're not going to Periscope.
We're not going to Periscope right now?
118 is the last one on Periscope.
Huh. All right. I might have to. I wonder why. Periscope is always kind of glitchy. I never know when it's going to go and when it's not.
Yeah, I know.
All right. Well, that's good to know. Let me see if it went on mine. I don't think it did. If it didn't go on yours. But that is. Nope. It did not go on mine either. In fact, it hasn't gone on mine the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, mine too. 118 was my last one.
All right, so I'll have to see. I may just need to re-authenticate it or something, although I did that last time. Either way, I'm not that concerned about Periscope. I'd rather be on YouTube and Facebook Live for these.
Right.
I think it's a better place. All right, cool. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here live. Wednesday, 1:30 Eastern Time. We will try and keep that recording schedule as much, as often as we can. Obviously, there may be a week or two here or there where that changes. But we can use the email list to alert you to that. And if you're following us on social media, we'll let you know if and when we do have to change a recording date.
Nice. It's been fun.
Hey, let me ask you a question. What do you think of some of the scripted parts? Let me tell you my thoughts real quick. I like them because it helps me prepare before we start and get the pertinent information out without rambling, which can sometimes happen on a live broadcast. But it also, I obviously don't want it to come across as too scripted. What are your thoughts on that so far?
I think I would agree with the exact same points. I like that we get it clearly across, sort of setting up the stage and not rambling, because it's not just like, oh, make sure I don't miss something and repeating things. So it's really clear what
it gets us into the conversational parts.
Right. And then you have like the music with it too. Yeah, I don't think there's a way to get around looking like you're reading it when you're on live, but
yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay with that because our primary audience that we're serving is the podcast audience.
Right.
We want the live show to be more of a look in on how we produce the podcast and, try to acknowledge and accommodate the live viewers as much as possible, but know that the first master that we're serving is the podcast audience. That's how I view it.
Well said. I would definitely keep that. I liked the question. Question was cool. It's going to make me think quicker. My rule should be that I have to come up with an answer quicker. But it was just like, because I thought of it today, it's like, what's it going to be like? And so that was cool. I like that. I like the music. I like it's got its parts now. I really dig that. Yeah. One thing I would maybe like to add.
Yes.
Is I really truly am super into this inner character, the elements, and then using your identity. it'd be cool even for like the next 4 or 5 episodes to like start off and say what like identity we're taking and what storylines we're going to use throughout this.
I like that.
I think it'll tie people back to this in case they missed it. They'll be like, I have to hear that now. And then they'll see it in action and be able to like think about it that way. But I think it will also push us to really clearly define the storylines. That's what I was thinking about it as you were wrapping up. I was like, that would be really cool, actually. So,
I like that. Okay, let's do that.
Cool.
Let's do that. That's a really good idea. Bob said, do you save audio on both ends of your conversation as backup for quality reasons? So we used to do it that way. Right now, the way that we record is this records to the cloud on Zoom. So we automatically have a backup recording. I also record locally on Audio Hijack, which is a program that I highly, highly recommend. So I can pull all the audio directly out of this Zoom while also getting my local audio. You don't record locally anymore, do you?
No.
Yeah, and I mean, we did that for a little while, but it was almost more work than you really got the benefit. Because your audio sounds fine, especially when we record it in Audio Hijack. You want to hear something funny? So, all these recordings get saved in a particular folder in Audio Hijack. And and this is another reason why I want to post these as soon as we record them, because when there's a week lag, last week I was going through and cleaning up some of the recordings and I just deleted the Audio Hijack recording. And I was like, damn it. Oh, okay. But I've got the cloud recording in Zoom. So I already had the recording. And if worse came to worse, we could always pull the recording off of YouTube. So we've literally got like several backups. Now, the Audio Hijack one is the highest quality, so I always want to keep that. It's much easier to do, and I'm going to put this together right after we end this live broadcast. But it's always good to have backup recordings. Yes, I never, ever trust one system to record anymore. And number 2, do something with the best file right away so you don't accidentally delete it, because it can happen.
Yeah, it has happened.
Yes. And then Bob also asked, do you ever batch produce shows like 6 at a time? I have before. Yeah. We've batch produced like 1 or 2 at a time, or like 2 or a couple times. But we're definitely not going to do it now because of the live component. Maybe if one of us has a vacation or something and we're going to be away, we might do it. I have done it in the past. I don't like it because I don't feel like every episode gets my full attention. I feel like I'm more focused on efficiency and getting it out. So I guess like if it's a topic that I can just talk about in my sleep, like if we wanted to batch produce like a 4-part episode talking about podcast positioning, and I've just done a course on podcast positioning, I could probably do that if we kept the episode short. But I just feel like it's hard to really give all of yourself and be 100% focused and energetic and enthusiastic batch producing episodes. So I see why you want to do it, and sometimes you need to do it, but I try to avoid it if I can. I just don't feel like I bring the best of myself to batch producing.
Right.
But I really like putting my hands in and all over one particular episode, getting that out, and then moving on to the next one. But I also prepare a lot for episodes. So
right. With Hack the Entrepreneur, I batch do interviews in the sense that I only do them on one day. And that's like my main focus on Tuesdays is doing interviews and staying sort of in that zone, but they're not like back to back typically. They're spread out throughout the day, which is how I like them too. But I don't have like an interview on Monday, one on Wednesday, that's just not how I do it. So I do that. And then I do all in one day. I do the recordings, the rest of it after, but again, not back to back because I feel like I would lose that energy. Too. So,
yep. Good questions, Bob. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And it's time to close up. I'm going to go get this podcast out before the next thing pops up here on my calendar.
I'm going to get an email out.
What's the email about?
It's about the new podcast positioning course that's on sale for $67 for another 6 hours.
Slowly but surely, I'm just going to accumulate good sound effects and just have an entire library of them for use.
Exactly. Pretty awesome.
All right, man. I will see you on Slack.
Okay, take care.
Bye, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.